What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Another episode of Seahawks Now, and we have some massive news to discuss today. The Seattle Seahawks have hired Clint Kubiak to be their next offensive coordinator. We're going to talk about Clint Kubiak. We're going to talk about some potential trade targets that this could open up, and then we're going to give my thoughts on do I think it's a good hire or not? And we're going to ask for your guys' thoughts down below in the comments as well. Welcome back. As always, this is your number one source of Seahawks news, updates, rumors, all sorts of things like that. So if you are not subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay updated with all the new information, all the latest information on the Seattle Seahawks, and hit the bell for notifications. Thank you to FanArch for sponsoring this video. Let's get into the show, guys. Clint Kubiak. Where did he come from? If you guys don't know, he came from New Orleans. But before that, he was the offensive coordinator in Minnesota, and he also was an assistant offensive coach in Denver. He is the son of the legendary former Denver Broncos head coach Gary Kubiak, so he has a history in the league. This is something the Seahawks have done before, right? They brought in Brian Schottenheimer, son of Marty Schottenheimer, and now they bring in Clint Kubiak, son of Gary Kubiak. So they kind of like to hire coaches with really good dads in the league, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's just something John Schneider does, but I just find it interesting. That's the second time he's done this. But Clint Kubiak, yeah, he has a history of great football knowledge. He worked with Denver for a long time as an assistant. He went to Minnesota for only one season when he was in Minnesota, and he did get fired from the Vikings, although I'm not sure necessarily if that was his fault. He was part of the Mike Zimmer group, and they all got fired. So I'm not sure if he was a victim of Mike Zimmer or if he was not that good. But that was the year when the Vikings did not make the playoffs. He was their offensive coordinator and then ended up getting replaced. He replaced Kevin Stefanski. So he came into Minnesota after Stefanski went to Cleveland, and then Kubiak got fired after 1 year. Then he went to New Orleans, and he actually ends up becoming their offensive coordinator last year. So he was the Saints offensive coordinator in 2023. And I know what you might be thinking is the Saints offense wasn't that good last year. But I want to touch on a few things. Before we look at the stats, I want to just give a little bit of a preamble because, look, Clint Kubiak was not working with very much in New Orleans. It's pretty clear, right? I mean, Derek Carr, he got hurt. He missed 7 games. When he was out, their quarterbacks were Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler, not necessarily the cream of the crop in the NFL. They also lost Chris Olave, their top receiver, for the entire season, about in October. They also lost Rashid Shaheed for the entire season, their number 2 receiver, and Taysom Hill got hurt and missed the entire second half of the year as well. So when we look at the stats, and yeah, the stats might be perfect, but you have to understand, he was working with a lot of backups. I mean, it was basically Alvin Kamara and a bunch of backups. So let's look at kind of the numbers. The Saints offense under Clint Kubiak, they scored 19.9 points per game, which is obviously less than the Seahawks scored. The Seahawks scored about 21 points per game. Saints scored about 20 points per game. So very close, but Seahawks actually were better. 320 yards per game. That is literally the same number that the Seahawks went. The Seahawks were for 320.3, Saints 320.1. Passing yards were down at 205, but the rushing yards at 114. So the Saints, they averaged the same amount of yards per game, but they did it in a little bit of a more balanced way, right? Seattle, they were throwing the ball 230 yards a game, rushing 90 yards a game. The Saints rushing 114.9 yards per game, so pretty much 115, and they threw for 205.2 yards per game. So they were definitely a more balanced offense, and you could say that's because of Alvin Kamara, and that definitely plays a role. But thinking about the Seahawks, they also have good running backs, so it's not like the Saints, the reason they ran the ball so well is because they had a much better running back. And then you look at the third down numbers, and this is definitely not ideal. 35.2%. The Saints were in the bottom 5 of the NFL in third down percentage, which is just not very good. But again, Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener, a lot of backups. I mean, by the end of the season, their wide receiver 1 was Cedric Wilson, and he wasn't even on the team at the beginning of the year. That's how injured and banged up that the New Orleans Saints were. So it's hard for me to really blame him for some of these struggles when pretty clearly there was a lot of injuries going on. There was a lot of things that he couldn't control. I mean, he can't control who gets hurt, right? That's pretty clear. So, yeah, I think for what he had, I thought he did decent. And remember, I mean, in September, when the Saints were fully healthy and when Derek Carr was healthy, this is the same team that dropped 40 points in Dallas over the Cowboys. So, yeah, I think he showed that he can be a good offensive coordinator when his team is healthy and when things are going well. So, I'm not opposed to this move at all. But let's look at a couple of pieces. Which former Saints could Clint Kubiak target to bring into Seattle? And obviously, my first thought is, can we get Taysom Hill? Because that guy is a beast. I don't know if that's going to happen. He's kind of a New Orleans Saints legend at this point, but there are a few other guys who might be available. So let's take a look at that. A couple of Saints free agents that are going to be available this offseason. We have a tight end and a wide receiver. So let's start with tight end Juwan Johnson. Last year, Juwan Johnson, 3 touchdowns, 548 yards on 50 receptions for 11 yards per catch. He was the Saints' starting tight end last year. He is currently a free agent. I don't think he's really a starting caliber guy, but if the Seahawks wanted to cut loose on Noah Fant, they could bring in Juwan Johnson and kind of platoon him with A.J. Barner. It would probably be a cheaper option at tight end. And Juwan Johnson is definitely, he has some talent. He proved himself in the Saints offense. He's had good seasons, and probably would be cheaper for the Seahawks if they wanted to move off of Noah Fant for a very similar level of production. The other target I want to look at is Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Now, Valdes-Scantling started the season with the Bills. He caught like 3 passes in Buffalo and wasn't doing anything, so he ended up getting cut, and he went over to the Saints. And he emerged as a big play weapon for Clint Kubiak in that offense. You look at the numbers, only 19 receptions, but he went for 411 yards, 21.6 yards per catch. That is insanely high, and 4 touchdowns. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, man, he's definitely a big play guy. He's not a volume wide receiver. He's not a guy who's going to catch 5 passes a game, but as a deep threat, as a big play guy, he can break free for some massive ones. So I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling could be a really fun guy to bring into Seattle, especially if you're thinking about cutting loose on Tyler Lockett. Marquez Valdes-Scantling as your wide receiver 3, I would be down with that in a heartbeat. Looking at those numbers, looking at the 21.6 yards per catch, that is excellent. I mean, that's at the very top end of the league among receivers. He's very fast, he's very shifty, and he can break a deep one every so often. There's a reason why Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes both enjoyed playing with MVS, and I would be interested to see him with Geno Smith in the Seahawks offense. So that's something that, yeah, I'm definitely down for that if the Seahawks are also interested. But I want to just kind of give some closing thoughts on the Seahawks' new look offense and, what Clint Kubiak could bring. Because I think Clint Kubiak is good. I think he's young. Definitely has a lot of potential to be kind of one of these young offensive geniuses. I do worry about his past because he was fired in Minnesota and he only went 1 year in New Orleans. By the way, I just want to clarify. He was not fired by the Saints. The Saints were apparently interested in bringing him back, but because they lost their head coach, Dennis Allen, this is considered an upgrade for him, I guess. So he's probably going to get paid more in Seattle, and he's going to be for a better team. He was not fired by the Saints. He was fired by Minnesota 3 years ago. But yeah, I think he can be good. I hope that he brings in a couple of those guys. I hope that you know what? If the Saints, if they cut Taysom Hill this year, I'd be down to bring him into Seattle as well, because the trick plays that that Clint Kubiak was running with Taysom Hill, some of those trick plays, I would love to see that in the Seahawks offense. But guys, that's all I have for you today. So let me know down in the comments below, how do you feel about Clint Kubiak coming in to be the Seattle Seahawks' new offensive coordinator? Are you happy about the move? Do you wish the Seahawks had gone elsewhere? Do you wish it could have been Hank Fraley or Byron Leftwich? Let me know down in the comments. I want to hear those thoughts. And as always, guys, go Seahawks. We'll see you tomorrow.